Добрый вечер.
Good evening. On the air, the information program time. In the beginning of the broadcast, briefly about the main events of the day. NATO aviation strikes on Serb positions have been suspended for 24 hours. Andrej Kozirev hopes that the escalation in Bosnia will not derail efforts for the peaceful regularization in the Balkans. President Yeltsin has promised support at the elections for movements of democratic and social direction. As of today, regular traffic has resumed, air traffic has resumed between Moscow and Grozny. In the Far East, celebrations of the Day of Peace on the Pacific Ocean have begun. More than 30 million students of Russia began their studies today. The blows dealt by the NATO Air Force on the objects of Bosnian Serbs resumed early this morning were temporarily suspended. A decision was adopted to limit the actions to flying around Serb territories. The UN mission in Zagreb hopes that the Serb side is prepared to agree to the terms of the NATO ultimatum. Serb sources report that the NATO retribution strikes have damaged more civilian objects than military objects. According to the latest reports from Serb military sources, 400 combat flights conducted to Bosnia by NATO planes severed almost 1,000 lives. 60% of the casualties were peaceful residents of the Serb Republic. 90 objects were paralyzed, mostly anti-air systems, command centers, ammunition depots, and radio stations, and a multitude of civilian objects have been destroyed. Blows of NATO aviation, from which the Republic of the Bosnian Serbs will unlikely be able to quickly recover, forced its leadership to re-establish relations with official Belgrade and decide on joint participation in peace talks. The return of the leaders of the Serb Republic to Belgrade dramatically changed the political situation in former Yugoslavia. Nonetheless, the bombings, which continued even today, in the opinion of Belgrade press, clearly show the West's desire, not paying attention to Russia, to pressure the Serbs to the end so that later Bosnia-Herzegovina could be divided on terms more beneficial to the Muslims. The assistant of the American Secretary of State, Richard Holbrooke, who today in Belgrade again met with the President of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic, at a short briefing said that currently the first serious talks on peace in the last 6 months are underway. They're discussing new maps, constitutional structure, and plans to restore the economy of all parts of Bosnia-Herzegovina. In that, the interests of Muslims will not be infringed upon. Dialogues continue today in the country hunting lodge of the Serbian president. At tomorrow's meeting in Germany, members of the International Contact Group evidently will have to decide what lever of pressure on the Serbs is more effective, dialogues or bombings. Vladimir Solovyov, Anatoly Klan, Public Russian Television from Yugoslavia. While the West applauds the successes of NATO aviation and successful blows of the artillery of rapid response on Serbian military and civilian objects, observers and journalists have increasingly more questions about the lawfulness of that punitive action. These doubts are not without a basis, especially since the decision to launch the military operation was adopted more than rashly. The blame was placed namely on the Bosnian Serbs. When a few days ago journalists asked the special representative of the UN Secretary General in former Yugoslavia, Isusi Akashi, on what such a conclusion was based, he cited the military command of the UN peacekeeping force in Sarajevo, which ostensibly conducted a thorough investigation. Although it only lasted a few hours, but a basis for conclusion was the appearance of a funnel from the explosion, radar indications, and visual observations from witnesses. The mine ostensibly was launched from a distance of 3 kilometers from the site of detonation, but as observers note, on that stretch closely located together were Muslim and Serb weapons together. Information surfaced also that the sound of the explosion was completely inaudible, and this indirectly indicates that it was launched from a closer distance. Independent experts don't exclude that the shot could have originated from a house in the Muslim part of Sarajevo. And one more circumstance evokes doubt about the trustworthiness of the UN conclusion. Despite the demands of the Bosnian Serbs to create a joint commission on investigation, they were not permitted to participate. All this gave opportunities for journalists and independent observers to conclude that the investigators were pressured. If one considers the threat of Bosnian Muslim leadership to sever talks on the peaceful regularization, such suspicions are not bereft of foundation. And when meticulous journalists attempted to learn from another representative of the UN Secretary General, Fred Eckhart, where that spot is from where the shell was launched, he was embarrassed and responded that he's not permitted to speak about that. The The Minister of Information of the Serb Republic stated today that the 5 observers of the European Union who ostensibly died Wednesday are alive. As the Serb radio Sarajevo reports, Thursday the international observers, alive and well, left the territory of the Bosnian Serbs. Today, a telephone conversation was held between the President of Russia with the President of France, Jacques Chirac, on the problem of Bosnian regularization. Boris Yeltsin confirmed that his suggestions to convene a summit remain in force under the conditions of intense preparation. Such a conference could be held in the middle of October in Moscow. And the President of Ukraine, Leonid Kuchma, addressed the warring sides in the Balkans with an initiative to hold peace talks in Kiev. Ukraine intends to only mediate, providing the 3 leaders of the warring sides its territory, but not interfering in the quest for means or options to resolve the conflict. The motivation of such a suggestion is that Ukraine has no geostrategic interests in the Balkans and therefore absolutely equally views all of the sides, not supporting any specific one. Proof of that could be the embassies. They're open in both Belgrade and Zagreb. The official delegation headed by the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vladimir Kandogi, met with the President of Croatia, Tudjman, and the Prime Minister of Serbia, Marjanovic, delivering personal letters from Leonid Kuchma with a description of the peace initiative. To Aliyev Izetbegovic, it was not possible to deliver a personal letter of the President. According to Dmitry Tabachnik, the head of the President's administration, as of today, Franjo Tudjman agreed to come to Kiev, the President of Croatia, and also the reaction was positive to that proposal of the President of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic. The response of the head of the Presidium of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Aliyev Izetbegovic, is expected in the near future. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs did not state its official position vis-à-vis the situation in the Balkans for 2 weeks. Today, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei Kozyrev, in an exclusive interview to public Russian television, spoke out regarding the NATO bombings of the Serbs and on the statement of President Clinton that this was the correct response. If they're participating in these bombings and were even one of the initiators of those bombings, what can you expect from them? That they will say that it was all wrong? I think that would be unrealistic. Therefore, Clinton is defending his position. We, nonetheless, continue to express our position that this was unnecessary. And that military provocation, that is the shelling of downtown Sarajevo and later the NATO air blows, they simply interrupted that political process in which, because of the meeting of Milosevic with President Yeltsin here in Moscow, to a significant degree, and I would say to a decisive degree, because of that, finally, now there is a window of opportunity. And nonetheless, the Serbs, whom we so actively supported, not just accepted the American plan, but also are not going to Moscow but to Kiev. Well, you know, such are the simplified reports from sources of mass media. First of all, there is no American plan in a complete form in existence. The American plan is an effort of the Americans, which we welcome, which we are discussing, and the composition of all of these efforts after. And we will hope the damage will not be too great to the political process because of these NATO strikes. But in any case, just through jointly pulling the weight, will this regularization be achieved? And everyone understands marvelously that here the issue is not who will shout first. No matter who shouts first, he will sound like a crow from a rooster, because not one person alone will be able to resolve it. And a claim to that achievement is simply absurd. But no one can argue that Russia plays one of the key fiddles and will continue to play it. And you will still see that the regularization will absolutely be with our most active and energetic participation. That is, you disagree with the assertions of certain representatives of Duma factions who have stated yesterday, literally, that Kozyrev has lost his kozir, that is, trump card, in the Balkans. There are deputies who are lacking their own trump cards and they're looking for marked cards. But if anyone, let's say the chairman of the committee, Lukin, or anyone else would come to me here and show me that magic wand, that is, he would tell us what we really have to do and how it all can be resolved in a remarkable way, with pleasure, I would concede my chair to him. But I have the impression that they're interested more in the chair itself and not in the regularization. Speaking of the events in former Yugoslavia, we not only attempt to relate to you what is occurring there now, but we always remember our personal loss. 4 years ago in Croatia, our correspondents went missing, Viktor Nagin and Gennady Kurinoi. Their vehicle was fired at, burned, and later hidden in a sand pit near the village Petrina. The journalists were not to be found. Unfortunately, they were not the last in the blacklist of journalists who died while performing their duties. Each year, tens of our colleagues throughout the world die for the sake of carrying out their duty, that is, to speak the truth. Now it's no longer important how they died or who killed our journalists, but the main thing is that the lives of two remarkable people were severed, our friends and colleagues whom we will always remember. Today in Moscow, a forum was held of the democratic press. It was involving journalists from all regions of Russia and the near and distant abroad. Boris Yeltsin admitted that the freedom of mass media, guaranteed by the Constitution, is violated frequently. Almost weekly, the president learns of new cases of discrimination against journalists. Some of them are subjected to rude insults by representatives of the ruling bodies for critical articles and materials. Boris Yeltsin feels that impeding the work of journalists should be viewed as a crime. The president wants a response from the corresponding organs to the question why, in this matter last year, was only one criminal case launched, and this year there are 3. I'm convinced that the matter concerns the entire journalist community of Russia. Also, the president called journalists to balance each word, because freedom of speech of mass media could lead to abuse of that. Depending greatly on the position of the press as the course of the beginning pre-election campaign, Boris Yeltsin stated that journalists should cover elections correctly and honestly. Should the pre-election campaign be turned into a gladiator's fight, or more correctly, a cockfight, think what can be done to create a barrier for distortion of facts, humiliating opponents, discrediting their views. The president announced that he will support all blocs of democratic direction, in whose platforms there are requirements for reforms and improving the lives of Russians. At the forum, the heads of the largest sources of mass media spoke. Let's never forget our great responsibility each day and each moment, because in the beginning there was the word. A significant part of the forum was the award ceremony for valor and professionalism of journalists. Among the laureates was the deputy editor-in-chief of the Public Russian Television Information Agency, Viktor Kuznetsov. As a volunteer hostage, he escorted the bus with terrorists from Budyonovsk. Dmitry Kochetkov, Evgeny Shversnikov, Valery Menshov, Public Russian Television. 2 more blocks of parties and movements announced their intention to run in elections today, but the Central Election Commission gave a green light only to one of them. Without any questions, the Commission registered the bloc running for the Deputy Duma seats, which is called the Communist Labor Russia for the Soviet Union. Another bloc, consisting of the Unified Democratic Center and the Pan-Russian Tatar Cultural Educational Center, will have to wait for a decision until next Tuesday. The problem is that by calling their bloc independent candidates, its participants, according to the Commission members, have substituted the clear notion of an independent candidate. This is the candidate, says the Commission, who does not enter into a bloc but runs independently at the elections. Here, there's an obvious loss of independence by candidates of their status because they have united within a bloc. So the question about the name of the bloc remains open. The Commission also issued clarification about the manner of actions of people who are connected with the elections. Specifically, the Commission emphasized that Russian and foreign observers and also journalists have the right on election day to be at the polling stations and be present during the vote tallying and also the compiling of the protocol on the results of the vote. Ivan Pankov, Mikhail Himagenov, Public Russian Television from the Central Election Commission. Today, the Council of the Movement, Our Home is Russia, completes its compiling of electoral lists. According to Interfax, the former Vice Premier of the Government of Russia, the head of the Commission on Developing the Platform for the Movement, Alexander Shokhin, will be one of those who will head the Moscow Regional Organization list. According to the Analytical Service of Our Home is Russia, as of today, that movement has a very good chance for victory in the Irkutsk, Leningrad, and Moscow districts. More complicated is the formation of the regional branches in the Vladimir district. Most serious competitors of Our Home is Russia in the regions are the movements Yabloko and the Communists. As was expected, the Council of the Party of Russian Unity and Accord followed the advice of its leader, Sergei Shachrai, and decided that the party must secede from the movement Our Home is Russia. Because in Our Home is Russia, such parties, great parties as the Party of Russian Unity and Accord, would perish. Therefore, my decision is to save the Party of Russian Unity and Accord. That's the decision of our Federal Council. Today, the official resolution of the Party of Russian Unity Accord was sent to the Council of the Our Home is Russia. Sergei Shachrai was authorized by his co-partisans to coordinate consultations with possible allies. Among them, Shachrai still sees the Our Home is Russia and Women of Russia, calling the latter strategic allies. The leader of the Unity and Accord parties feels that his party has a good chance and he'll count on mostly his own electoral, not trying to embrace the unembraceable. The Party of Russian Unity and Accord promises many unstandard solutions, including the organization, jointly with the parliamentary elections, of a referendum on land. Slogans of the pre-election campaign will be principles of federalism and local self-rule. And the day the president signs the law on local self-rule is considered now to be an inter-party celebration. The party of Shachrai, which for 4 months was in the Our Home is Russia and therefore fell out of the information field, should begin a pre-election campaign at the moment when the rivals' campaign is in full swing. A convention has been planned for the second half of September, and although today the decision to leave the Our Home is Russia was not unanimous, 3 regional organizations were in opposition, but this will not affect the opinion of the Common Party Forum, and the convention will merely have to ratify the decision of Sergei Shachrai and the Council of the Party. Vlada Vishnevskaya, Alexander Isaev, Public Russian Television. The social political movement, the Union of Muslims of Russia, intends to achieve success at the coming parliamentary elections and create a serious faction in the new State Duma. This was stated by the Secretary General of the Union, Ahmed Khalitov. Assessing economic perspectives of Russia, Khalitov spoke out for the orientation toward Islamic countries, which, according to him, unlike Western countries, are prepared to aid the Russian Federation without laying exacting Kabbalah servitude demands. President Yeltsin, at a meeting with the new governor of the Sverdlovsk district, Eduard Rosal, agreed to review the agreement on delimiting objects of jurisdiction and mutual delegating of powers between the Sverdlovsk district and the federal authorities. Reporting this to Interfax, the press secretary of the governor said that the meeting, which lasted for about 1 hour, was like an intimate conversation, and the president expressed a desire to complete work on a package of agreements within 2 months. Today in Vladivostok, the triumphant opening of the Days of Peace on the Pacific began, dedicated to the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. To participate in the functions, delegations from countries from the Pacific region arrived. Russia is represented by the first Vice Premier, Oleg Saskovets, and the Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachov. The basic festivities of the Days of Peace on the Pacific Ocean will begin the 2nd of September, but for now Vladivostok continues to receive a record number of guests from 30 countries of the world. 240 Pacific veterans arrived from almost all the CIS countries. Among them are 5 members of the crew of the famous S-56 submarine, which is set up at Vladivostok on a pedestal to eternal glory. At the dock of the main Pacific Fleet, dropping anchor were the USS O'Brien under the flag of the American Navy on Mariinsky Islands and the patrol ship of the Chinese Navy. They will participate in the military marine parade the 3rd of September in the Amur Gulf. For the first time, falling into parade order will be civilian ships as well. This is an homage to the memory of the perished seamen of the merchant marines in fiery voyages on the Pacific. In the framework of the festivities in Vladivostok, a military and historical conference will be held. During these days, the regular ships of the Pacific Fleet and its marines are participating in such anniversary celebrations, but in another part of the Pacific, the United States is celebrating the end of World War II at Pearl Harbor and Honolulu on the Hawaiian Islands. Mikhail Voznesensky, Public Russian Television from Vladivostok. The festivities on the occasion of the end of war give cause for close attention to anything which is connected with weapons of mass destruction. Today, the Ministry of Defense of France stated that there would be no preliminary information about the testing of nuclear devices on the Atoll Mururoa until such time that France detonates the first of the 8 nuclear devices. The statement was made in connection with the fact that the Secretary General of the government of Japan said in Tokyo that the first French nuclear test may be held today at approximately 2200 hours Moscow time. The international team of Greenpeace environmentalists plans to stage a landing in that part of the atoll where the French nuclear device will be detonated. Involved in that operation will be specially trained Greenpeace divers. Simultaneously, the flagman of the environmental movement, Rainbow Warrior 2, will attempt to break the blockade of French military ships which close access to the 12-mile restricted zone of the atoll. This was learned by the command of the French Navy in the southern part of the Pacific. They are also aware that one of the ships of the environmental organizations is carrying an American congressman. If the battle at sea is still ahead, in Tahiti, for the second day, special service subdivisions of the French police are clashing with participants of anti-nuclear demonstrations. Today, they attempted to get through onto the territory of the military airport. From there, French planes take off for the Murarwa. The demonstrators demanded that all nuclear devices be removed from the atoll and that they be tested in France. If in Paris, they cannot reject the idea of nuclear restraint. Tens of thousands of kilometers from Atoll Murarwa, the wave of anti-nuclear protest was raised in Paris. An international protest petition signed by 4 million people from many countries of the world was to be delivered along the Seine River to the center of the city. Along a live chain comprised of Greenpeace members, it was then to be delivered to the Élysée Palace to President Chirac. But at the river routes into Paris, the police blockaded both the ships and the petition. This, however, did not stop, despite the ban, several hundreds of demonstrators in the presence of a multitude of press to express their anti-nuclear sentiments and moods. According to the just published results of the latest poll of public opinion in Paris, 63% of Parisians decisively condemn the resumption of nuclear tests, and 78% of the people feel that there is no need to perfect nuclear weapons. The idea officially expressed by President Chirac yesterday, which had previously fluttered about here in political circles, that perhaps in the future the European Union could integrate its defense system with the French nuclear restraint force, has not yet met enthusiasm in Western European capitals. In this proposal, and there are some, tend to see Paris's attempt to knock down the wave of protest against the resumption of nuclear tests. Today's action of the international environmental organization Greenpeace, which was held in Paris without particular excesses or vicious confrontations with law and order officials who encircled the demonstrators in a firm cordon on the Bridge of Alexander III and on the Champs-Élysées, adjacent to the presidential palace, evidently became a prelude to the fact that each nuclear explosion on the atoll Murarwa with a loud echo of protest will resound on the banks of the Seine. Evgeny Lukyanov, Vadim Vyazov, Public Russian Television from Paris. In Grozny today, the voluntary surrender of weapons began. To conduct that operation, a time limit has been set until the 5th of September. After the time limit expires, weapons will be confiscated in a coercive manner, so the commandant of Grozny clarified. And for voluntary surrender of weapons, monetary payments are planned up to 1 million rubles. In each weapons receipt point, representatives from the main staff of the Dudaev formations may be present. In Chechnya, it was decided to create a joint commission to search for individuals missing in action. Members of that commission intend to visit the investigation isolation facilities in several Russian cities, specifically Vladikavkaz and Mineral Waters. To these cities, initially, all those detained Chechens were sent. In order to establish the fate of them, however, has not been possible yet. Today, from Grozny to Moscow, the last special flight departed, and simultaneously in the airport in the Chechen capital, the first civilian plane from Rostov-na-Don landed. Next week, from the Grozny-Severny airport, regularly passenger planes will fly to Moscow, Rostov, Tyumen, and possibly other cities of Russia. Air traffic with Grozny was interrupted in July of last year in connection with the political situation in Chechnya, and today's opening of the airport is one more thread connecting Chechnya with other regions of Russia. From Grozny, planes are already flying, but to travel by car in the city is still dangerous. Just now, the deputy main sanitary physician of Russia, Gennady Anishenko, returned from Chechnya. He was among the experts of the Security Council. Here's what he said in an exclusive interview to our program. On this very spot, the vehicle passed us, and you remember there was a sharp left turn on that bend. We get out and we hear automatic rounds. Automatic rounds started. They had masks on their faces. They were shouting, suggesting that we get out of the car, and they immediately pushed us into the back seat and took off, turned around, and proceeded in the opposite direction. We got to the main mountain road and somewhere to the mountainous region. They took us 20 kilometers away. And they began to ask us, who are you and why? I have my documents, and I said that we are doctors. I said I'm a doctor, but the driver is not a doctor. And we told them what we do. It was extremely tense, and they warned us. And they said that we have been following you for 2 days. We were waiting for you here, that you would appear in this spot. You are cooperating with the opposition. And I said, I'm not cooperating with anyone because I'm involved in healthcare, and healthcare has never been involved in politics. Gennady Onyshenko and his driver spent 1 day with the gunmen. Several times they were threatened they would be shot, but they were lucky. At night they were thrown back out onto the road where a bus picked them up. According to our information, the day before, in a similar manner, in the old industrial area of Grozny, a responsible worker of the territorial department was captured. He never did return. Since the beginning of this year, Gennady Onyshenko has spent overall 4 months and 7 days in Chechnya. He was restoring sanitary services there, organizing the battle with the epidemics of cholera and polio. As of today in Chechnya, 93 cases of that terrible illness have been recorded. 141,000 children were vaccinated. Now in Grozny, Kudermes and Urus Martan, the Moscow sanitary doctors, are at work, specialists from Stavropol and Rostov. What occurred with Gennady Onyshenko forces one to fear for their fates as well. The Minister of Internal Affairs of Georgia said today that, in his opinion, the terrorist act in Tbilisi, directed against the head of state, Edvard Shevardnadze, was an attempt at the beginning of a state coup in the republic. He reported that several days ago the police had detained a terrorist group which was involved in the murder of the leader of the opposition National Democratic Party of Georgia, Georgi Chinturi. In detail about today's situation in Tbilisi, in the report of our correspondents. Today in central Tbilisi, the head of state, Edvard Shevardnadze, triumphantly opened the secondary school number 1. With a 2-century history, the school was demolished during the events of 1992 and restored this year through the money of Russians. In Shevardnadze's opinion, the beginning of the school year in the new school is an historical event, a clear demonstration of the correctness toward political stability in Georgia. Meanwhile, the investigative team studying the circumstances of the recent assassination attempt on Shevardnadze also have a day of knowledge. 11 militia from the extra-departmental patrol of the parliament were arrested, who possibly aided the parking of the car bomb at the special parking space. In the building of parliament, again, automatic weapons were found, 3 anti-tank grenade launchers and 1 shell launcher. At the same time, the press center of the Parliament of Georgia said that today's planned triumphant signing of the Constitution of Georgia is postponed on the request of Edvard Shevardnadze. Before the pre-election campaign, naturally emerging into the foreground will be all of these fighters for justice, as they say. That is the criminals in the political sense. Therefore, we must step up the fight with real crime, increase that fight only within the framework of the law. Meanwhile, despite constant criticism of Shevardnadze by his opponents, specifically Jean Basiliani, life in the capital of Georgia is unusually calm. People are no longer afraid to stay out on the streets until late at night. Mikhail Zotov, Georgi Ratishvili, Alexander Lichishevsky, public Russian television from Tbilisi. The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, signed a decree through which he suspended the operations of free labor unions and deprived deputies of parliamentary immunity. Experts of Interfax in Minsk assert that such a document is a justification for the law enforcement organs of the Republic, which on the days of the strike of the metropolitan workers held 30 participants of the strike and 2 deputies for several days at one of the compounds of the Internal Affairs offices. Today, the Russian government publicized 3 principal decisions. In detail, at a press conference, the Vice Premier Anatoly Chubais related. Pursuant to the decree of the President, the developed proposal by the consortium of banks to extend to the government credits with collateral of packages of shares of privatized companies. They will be conveyed on a tender basis to anyone who wishes, but depending on those who offer a greater volume of credits, Chubais emphasized. In the second phase, on a tender basis, the sale of the packages themselves will occur. This will be an extremely attractive and profitable campaign. Also, this will involve the largest Russian oil companies. Export duties today are levied at a rate of between 30 to 50%, and by year end, Chubaiz noted, additional measures will be adopted to protect domestic producers. And finally, a program for the development of share investment funds was adopted. The government tightens requirements on companies working with citizens' savings. All those companies which are prepared for a civilized procedure of transformation, all those companies which are prepared to report what they really have as far as assets go and are prepared to transform into this civilized form will receive complete support from the Federal Commission on Securities. Those companies, however, who don't undergo that procedure are subjected to closure in the manner established by law. Now, in Russia, there are 750 companies operating. 10 are operating throughout the country. All of them must receive licenses upon complete revelation of their activities. Today is the Day of Knowledge, a holiday for children and adults. Millions of young Russians, pupils and students return to their classes and auditoriums today, and the school year began. This holiday is literally a national common holiday because, in our case, each fourth Russian is a student. The Day of Knowledge in Moscow will now be celebrated as follows. All the last months, the 1st of September was cause for a common concern. Shortage of money for new schools, repair of old ones, textbooks, salaries for teachers virtually threatened to cancel the school year. In the end of the summer, with the Russian all-hands-on-deck attitude, the matter was corrected. The government found money for education and promised big money in the future. Taking his granddaughter to first grade, Viktor Chernomyrdin no longer feared questions about textbooks because this is 90% resolved. But other problems do remain. In northern schools, for instance, payments on utilities are becoming a prime existence factor. The lack of schools is existent for refugee children. As the question was answered regarding protection for contemporary children, Vice Premier Yadov said we shouldn't protect them but contribute and fulfill the constitutional debt. This is very important. Special contributions will be needed by Chechnya, where the majority of children didn't go to school today. Of 50 schools, repairs were not completed in 34, so the beginning of lessons is postponed. Incidentally, this will have to be done even in those schools where repairs have been completed. Before you is secondary school number 7, at one time the best in the city. There are many today who would like to attend. They drew the traditional line, but lessons never did begin. In the replaced classrooms, there is not a single desk. In Grozny alone, there's a shortage of 70 teachers of the Chechen language, and the problem is that there is nowhere to train them yet, just as there is no place to print textbooks in the Chechen language. In the Department of National Education, we were told that all hope lies on federal organs of rule. From Grozny, Nikolai Shavalkov, Rudolf Ushanov, Public Russian Television. But on this day, we would like more to rejoice, and not like the children of Vladivostok, who, because of bad summer weather, had their vacation extended by 2 weeks, but for a serious reason. Because never in Russia was there such a number of high school students as this year. We did build 250 new schools. 1,200 boys and girls, youths and maidens, their mothers and fathers from the ancient Russian village of Donskoye came today to their new school. And this is not the only new construction of the district, the administration of which took on financial concerns to build schools in the villages. And such as this, in comfort and equipment, this could rival with any city school. The villagers form their own budget, not reaching into the federal pocket, which permitted them 1 month ago by 1.5 times to increase the salaries to teachers and, in general, to the workers of the budget sphere. Incidentally, the school textbooks here are free of charge. Care for children falls mostly on women's shoulders, but the circle of responsibilities of the majority of women by far exceed the family framework. To discuss all problems which concern them, women are gathering for their World Forum in Beijing. In the morning, they took their children and grandchildren to the first lessons, fulfilling their family duty, and by lunchtime, they gathered in Viktor Chernomyrdin's office in a different capacity. I congratulate all of you on the Day of Knowledge. Whoever has students in their family and whoever has teachers in their families, and I congratulate all of you. It's a big day. They are among the delegation of 32 to represent the women of Russia at the Fourth World Conference. It will open on the initiative of the UN in Beijing the 4th of September. Traveling to fight for women's rights on a world scale are people who are accomplished in all regards with master's and PhD degrees, deputies of the State Duma leaders, the leader of Social Security, the Minister of Social Security, and representatives of the business sphere from Moscow, St. Petersburg, Sverdlovsk, Bashkiria, and Dagestan. Among them is also our journalist, Natalia Chernyshova. In Beijing, the delegation will suggest its platform of action, which in detail it discussed with the Prime Minister, concerning defense of motherhood and childhood, resolving problems of health care, and employment for the women's part of the population. Very real for the women of Russia remains their goal, a greater participation of women in areas of authority. Otherwise, how can one explain the fact that we have only one female minister, and in the upper chamber of parliament we have only 9 women? However, in the manufacturing sector, every second person is a woman. Therefore, as a separate point in the agenda, that meeting was the broad participation of women in the pre-election campaign. Yelena Kazenkova, Alexander Ovshadov, the House of the Government for Public Russian Television. The last report of this broadcast is a sad reminder of the fact that today, exactly half a year has passed since that day, when in the driveway of his own home, the first general director of Public Russian Television, Vladislav Listyev, was killed. A representative of the investigative department of the Prosecutor General stated today that the term for that case has been extended until the 1st of December. According to him, there are no individuals detained or arrested in connection with the murder. However, the investigation has received specific data permitting it to hope to solve the crime. I'll remind you of the main events of the day one more time. NATO air raids on Serb positions have been suspended for 24 hours. Andrei Kozyrev hopes that the escalation in Bosnia will not upset the efforts on the peaceful regularization in the Balkans. President Yeltsin has promised support at elections for the movements of democratic and social direction. As of today, regular air traffic has resumed between Moscow and Grozny. In the Far East, the celebrating of the Days of Peace on the Pacific Ocean has begun. More than 30 million students of Russia began their lessons today. Good evening. On Channel 1, the Sports News. The American Tennis Open, for now, favors Russian athletes. As you already know, in the third round is our best tennis player, Evgeny Kafelnikov, and yesterday he was joined by Alexander Volkov and Yelena Makarova. Volkov in 4 sets beat Bogdan Ulerach from the Czech Republic, and Makarova in a fierce battle beat the American Laura McNeil 4-6, 6-2, 7-6. Seated second at the U.S. Open, Monica Seles is for now only warming up, but her rivals can only shrug their shoulders. Yesterday, a victim of her powerful, aggressive game was Erica Delon 6-2, 6-1, and another brilliant one single for Seles. Moving up in the tournament ladder is Conchita Martinez and Yana Novotná. Although specialists don't count them among the main favorites, both tennis players are capable of providing any surprise for the trio of leaders. Forcing his fans to worry a little was the first world seed Andre Agassi, losing through the match to Carrete from Spain in sets 1 and 2. The idol of the American public gained his control and in the decisive match demolished his rival 6-love, 6-2. And yet yesterday there were surprises. Sergei Bruguera in every way has lost to Daniel Wacek, and the real sensation was provided by Sarkisyan from Yerevan, knocking Andrei Medvedev out of the competition. And the Swede, Stefan Edberg, after the victory over Nestor from Argentina, will have to cross rackets with Andre Agassi. At one-time specialists would not have ever tried to predict the results of such a match. About other events, the junior Russian handball team is in the semifinals of the World Championship underway in Argentina, holding a decisive victory today over the Egyptians, 33-23. On Saturday, our team will meet with the Norwegians. In Yaroslavl, at the start of the international hockey tournament for youth youth teams. In the first match, the Russians lost to the Czech rivals 1-3. The teams of Finland and Sweden tied 4-4. Even less successful was the debut of our first team at the international tournament of Prague Bank in the Czech Republic. The hosts left the Russians not a single chance, winning 4-1. Last year, the Russian team also lost to that team 3-5 and later was defeated again by it at the World Championships. In yesterday's match, the only score for our team was scored by the forward of the Cherepavets Northern Steel, Mikhail Ivanov, and we'll show you it at the end of the broadcast. But this evening, the Russians are holding a second match with the vice champions of the world, the Swedes. Trek Runer at the starting match lost to the Slovakia team 3-5. However, on the Scandinavian team, there were only 5 hockey players with silver medals of the last World Championship. And for the Slovaks, playing brilliantly was the offense of the Washington Capitals, Peter Bondra. In Finland, the Gold Cup tournament began. In the starting match, the Moscow Dynamos lost with a score 2-6 to the hosts, the TPS. Now you see excerpts of the match of the teams in the finale of the Championship Cup 2 years ago when the Dynamos also lost to the team of Vladimir Ruzin. The Blues and Whites at the tournament will play 2 more times against the Swedes, Malno and Chabe 71. In the suburban Moscow Vidno, the International Motorcycle Ball Championships began, the first competition of its type, with the vice champion and champion of Ukraine, the Mydnik and Niva, and also the hosts, the team Metallurgists, which this year won the European Championship Bowl. In the first match, the Vidna team met with the Nita motorball team. The advantage of the 10-time champion of the USSR in Russia was undisputed during the entire event, but we must say that for the athletes of Vidna, there are no secrets to the virtuoso handling of motorcycles and enormous balls. Today, the team Benetton Ford announced that it has signed a 2-year contract with Gerhard Berger. Hence, both current Ferrari drivers, Alesi and Berger, will re-establish their tandem next year, but under the Benetton flags. The leader of the team, Michael Schumacher, on the contrary, is going to Ferrari. Today in Berlin, the track and field Grand Prix begins. Specialists expect several world records from that tournament. In the 100-meter dash, a small miracle could be performed by Linford Christie. The fight for the centimeters on the distance will end up in the duel between Gwen Torrance and Erle Moti. And finally, at the 5-kilometer, we're looking at Moses Kiptanu and Haile Gebrselassie. That was the sports news on Channel 1. In conclusion of the broadcast, the previously promised goal of Mikhail Ivanov, the ability to fight to the end and extract maximum benefit, even in hopeless situations. About that, our today's clip of the day. Goodbye. Good evening. And now September has come. Its folk nicknames were the leaf dropper, the gold color, the blush of autumn, the evening of the year, the frowner, and other names. Previously, they surmised the drier and warmer September, the later winter would come. And so, in the north of European Russia, in the first days of autumn, the weather will be dictated by an anti-cyclone. Here, it's mostly clear and dry. In the Murmansk-Arkhangels district, in the Nenetsk Autonomous District, and the Republic of Komi, in the morning and evening it's cool, plus 5 to 10, and during the day, 18 to 24 degrees on the Kola Peninsula, 12 to 17. In the northwestern region, in Karelia and the Volgovetsk area, there will be more clouds. That's connected with a slightly active atmospheric front, which will bring some light rains into the area. At night, 10 to 12, during the day, 22 to 27. In Karelia, 15 to 20. The weather of the Baltic states will be influenced by the proximity of a cyclone with a center over northeastern Poland. Therefore, mostly cloudy skies are expected, with some isolated rains during the day, 16 to 21. In the west of the central region, in the zone of atmospheric fronts, some brief periods of rain. On the rest of the territory, there is no precipitation expected. At night, 9 to 14, during the day, 20 to 27. In Belarus, in the north of Ukraine, in the zone of lower atmospheric pressure and fronts, variably cloudy skies with some isolated brief rains. The more intense rains with some isolated thunderstorms are expected expected in the area of another cyclone, which is coming in from the Balkans. Temperatures of 18 to 23 in the east of Ukraine, 22 to 27. That same temperature in the central Chernozem areas of Russia, on the lower Don in the Krasnodar-Stavropol rim area, and the northern Caucasus is expected. But here, under the influence of atmospheric fronts, there will be some isolated rains and thunderstorms. On the central and lower Volga, in a zone of heightened atmospheric pressure, it's hot and dry, 28 to 33. The same weather is expected to be on the Caucasus. In St. Petersburg, without significant precipitation at night, 12 to 14 during the day, 24 to 26 degrees. In the capital, during the weekend, the weather will rejoice Muscovites, giving them a little bit more warm and sunny weather. Tomorrow, variably cloudy skies with some isolated brief periods of rain. At night, 9 to 11. During the day, 23 to 25 degrees throughout the district, as high as 27. On Sunday, it will be warmer by 2 or 3 degrees. Have a pleasant rest.